The remote workforce is no longer the exception, but the rule. Full time employees, as well as contract workers, need secure access to corporate applications and data, regardless of device, whenever they need it, and wherever they are in the world. But access alone isn't enough. Security is also needed, and IT teams need observability to see work patterns, to optimize performance. It's a tall order. Hi, I'm Stan Gibson, and I'll be your host and moderator for this CIO webcast. Joining me to explore how to increase the productivity, efficiency, and security of your remote workforce are three experts. Dharmendra Mohan, CEO of Sonnet.io. Welcome, Dharmendra. It's great to have you here for this webcast.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me here, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Also with us, Tyrone Watson Ferguson, Head of Cyber Infrastructure at Burns& and McDonnell. Welcome, Tyrone. I'm glad you could be with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And Sean Bass, former CTO of VMware End User Computing and now advisor to Sonnet.io. Welcome, Sean. It's great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Stan. Great to be here with you all.
Dharmendra, to begin, could you please tell us just a bit about Sonnet.io? As the founder, what are your company's goals?
Yeah, so we built Sonny.io to connect any remote worker to the tools they need to get their job done from any device, any browser, with security built in. That's a major concern for IT, with visibility aspects built in. Our key goal was to be able to build a solution that gives great user experience for every remote worker, but at the same time, simplify the IT overhead that goes in to create all these remote work solutions. There's a lot of overhead in terms of integrating all these point solutions together. So we wanted to simplify for IT, but at the same time giving a great user experience to the end users.
Well, what about the state of remote access today? Everyone knows there are more remote workers than ever, but what's different about today's remote workforce compared with just a few years ago? And why are new solutions needed? Sean?
Yeah, that's a good question, Stan. So, pre-pandemic, I think we saw most organizations running anywhere from around maybe 10 to 20% of their workforce operating on a remote basis, either full-time or even part-time when they needed accommodations. But of course, when the pandemic happened, we moved from that, 10, 20% to 90 plus percent people operating remotely on a full-time basis, simply out of need. Now that the pandemic has largely gone into kind of a maintenance period, what we're starting to see as organizations begin to embrace a 2 to 3 day return to office where they bring people together to collaborate, and the other, 1 to 3 days, depending on the organization, is operating remotely. Now, what that basically means is that we're really in a permanent state of hybrid workforce today. And that means that we need to give people a consistent experience, whether they're in the office or out of the office. And we also need to be able to embrace things like device choice and bring your own device, because people are going to be operating on a multitude of different devices. And we have to be able to accommodate those needs that the employees are bringing to an organization.
Tyrone, how does your experience differ from just a few years ago?
Oh, wow. A few years ago, when the pandemic hit, the bank I was working at didn't have a remote workforce. So we literally had to issue laptops to a ton of people that had literally never worked from home before. Some people did not know how to get on Wi-Fi. Um, it was complete shell shock for a lot of people, and here we are 3 almost 4 years later. It's the new normal. So
Dharmendra, when you talk to IT leaders, what do they tell you about remote work?
Yeah, I think the IT leaders are struggling because um, they are relying still upon the legacy technologies that were built like a decade ago, and like Sean said, the remote work era has completely changed, and so they're struggling with integrating these point solutions, maintaining, patching all those solutions, and also if they were to quickly onboard users, they are struggling with that as well. It sometimes takes weeks because they have to ship devices, or they have to scale their VDI solutions. So there is quite a bit of friction all around. Also, from an end user point of view, they are complaining as well because the user experience is definitely not at par with what they expect from when they do their personal work. So we see friction both from IT point of view as well as from end user perspective, and these point solutions tend to be very costly as well. So there is a force behind trying to reduce costs and the IT resource needed to maintain these solutions.
Let's drill down just a bit deeper from the user's point of view. Sean, how can we give users a better remote work experience?
Yeah, it's a great question, Stan. So I think that things have changed dramatically in terms of the consumer point of view of IT. It used to be that you'd go to the office to get great access to technology, and now most people have better technology in their home than they do in their workplace. And the app store economy has kind of driven this notion of one-click access to download and install an application without requiring IT, without requiring any kind of support or handholding. So user expectations have turned into this mode of I need fast and easy access to my applications and data. I don't want to have to call IT. I don't want to have to install 6 different applications just to get remote access to my work environment. And I don't want to call and put in a ticket or talk to IT support. In addition, end users are expecting flexibility to work on any device. Most people are carrying 2 to 3 different types of devices and expect to be able to seamlessly move between those devices and conduct their work. And I'd say the last thing to go back to that support and technology related challenge, the newer generation of workers, the Gen Z workers that are going into companies today at much greater numbers, they are born out of that app store era. So if they find out from IT they have to follow a 25-page document and install 4 different pieces of software to get their device ready to do remote work, they're simply not going to want to engage in remote work with that company. They're going to look for companies that have a much simpler way of doing work.
Tyrone, what's your take on the end user point of view here?
Yeah, I agree with Sean quite a bit there. End users have definitely driven the organization to mature the user experience and the user integrations, and really force, I would say, the delivery of those applications to really be intentional and understand what the end user is in any type of technology adoption program. If the end users rebel when you're trying to roll the technology out, it a lot of times can really be a showstopper as far as proceeding that project. So it's uber important.
Well, Dharmendra, what's your take here? Obviously, users have very high expectations, maybe unreasonable expectations. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think the user experience is what we had in mind while building Sonin.io, and like what Sean and Tyrone both touched upon. Um, what users are expecting now is to have the same experience that they have when they do their personal work, which is primarily using browsers. They just don't need any VPN or any kind of deployment on their device. They can go from one device to another. That's exactly what we achieve through Sign.io. You can connect to any enterprise tool you want from any device using your favorite browser. So you basically get the same experience that you are comfortable with when you use your personal work, which enables them to use their own personal devices as well to connect to their tools they need. So we exactly delivering the same experience that they do when they go to their personal work using their personal devices. So that's exactly what we are trying to deliver. You access tools from any browser, and obviously web applications, SaaS applications, but you also access even the desktop applications straight from the browser itself.
Well, remote access, of course, is hardly new, but previous approaches had problems. They failed on many levels, really. Many were simply too complex, too hard to set up, too difficult to administer. How do you see the challenges of those implementations, and how does Sonnet.io address them, Sean?
Yeah, I've been doing virtual desktop and virtual app technologies, which is a typical way that a lot of organizations use for remote access over the last, 20, 30 years. And the challenge with doing traditional virtual desktop and virtual app technologies is it can often take weeks, if not months, for an organization to architect, and purchase and deploy all the infrastructure and manage and operationalize that in order to run, a few thousands or tens of thousands of users to use their applications. And so you've got this extremely long timeline to initially deploy before you get time to value. Now, cloud-based solutions like Sonnet.io allows an organization to deploy in a matter of minutes, if not hours, and get their users access to the applications that they need. And also importantly, and one of the key benefits of the cloud is if you need to increase capacity to get more users into the environment, and let's say a scale from 100 to 500 users, it's literally a matter of just pushing a button in the console and deploying some additional capacity. Whereas in a traditional on-premises model, you've got to order servers and switches and various other components. And again, that can take weeks to months, depending on supply chain challenges. And then you've got to deploy and manage that to scale up the environment. So cloud has really made it easy for organizations to onboard new users, but also to grow and increase the capacity of that. And then the last thing I'll say that we also have to remember is you've got to pay attention to the burden on the IT administrators who have to deploy and manage and operationalize all this. If you're giving them a technology that requires them to spend weeks or months in deploying it and managing it and operating it, that's time taking them away from other important projects the business might want to have them do. So by moving these technologies to a cloud native approach, you enable the IT admins to quickly deploy, quickly expand capacity, and really focus their effort on other high priority business objectives and not spend time carrying and feeding to the traditional VDI solution.
Well, I think that's a good segue to Tyrone here. Tyrone, I'm assuming you always are looking for solutions that reduce IT overhead and minimize complexity. Is that right?
Absolutely. My goal is always to keep things as simple as possible. Even the most complex problems have a simplest form of the problem. And so that's initially what I try to do to anything is get down to a simplest form and understand like what is really the problem we're trying to solve at heart. And then the IT overhead, to Sean's point, whether you're a security administrator or general administrator, the amount of time you spend in break fix, unplanned work really is the opportunity cost or sunk cost of you being able to spend time in innovation or doing things to move the business forward. So I'm always very, very aware and intentional about the things we put in and roughly the amount of overhead I think it'll add to the team.
Well, Dharmendra, maybe you could explain just a little further how Sonnet.io has addressed the complexity issue.
Yeah, absolutely, Stan. So I think definitely simplicity that Tyrone mentioned is what we had in mind to make sure that we do not put burden on IT, reduce the IT overhead significantly. And we basically architected the solution that Sean talked about. So Sound.io is cloud native, completely architected with cloud native technologies, basically born in the cloud. So we were not tethered with legacy technologies at all. So from ground up, keeping IT simplicity in mind, um, highly elastically, we can scale without any kind of human intervention. We can deploy globally anywhere within an hour. And you can go from 100 to 500 automatically without requiring any IT intervention there, without requiring any intervention from Sign.io team. Just it'll elastically scale and globally deployable anywhere in the world within an hour.
Well, the fact that Sonnet.io is cloud based is certainly a virtue, but some might ask in a cloud based remote access portal, there might be a performance hit. How does Sonnet.io address performance?
Yeah, Stan, I can take that one. So typically, when you run any type of remote application experience, whether it's a virtual desktop or a virtual app solution, one of the things that you always want to try to achieve is data locality. You want to keep the execution tier where the compute runs as close to the data as possible. And I think that's an area where a lot of people say, like, oh, if I put something in the cloud, that's going to be bad because then where it runs in the cloud might be further away from where the data is located if the data happens to be in my data center as opposed to being in the public cloud. But I think there's two facets to think about when you consider those latency numbers. First and foremost, many organizations are moving existing applications out of their data centers and into the public cloud. So many times you actually do have your data localized within the same cloud provider that you're going to be running the Sonnet solution in.
Let's turn our attention to security next. Everyone, of course, wants to prevent data breaches, but how can we do better when it comes to protecting remote devices, keeping them from becoming attack vectors? What about zero trust? Is zero trust the right approach?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Stan. Zero trust is absolutely the right approach. And within zero trust, you want to design policies for what's called conditional access, where based on what the user is trying to do, where the user is located, if they're trying to do a privileged operation, you need to be able to dial up and down the security controls and always make sure that you're logging and auditing any activity that that user is doing so you can go back and review it later to identify if there were compliance breaches or anything that would trigger kind of an audit flag. But I want to talk about a really important issue in the context of security, and that is at the end of the day, the most important thing we're trying to protect is our data. And if you look at traditional virtual desktop or virtual app solutions, they do centralize data in a single location typically. But the challenge is it becomes very hard to protect the data in a traditional virtual desktop or virtual app solution. So let me just paint a scenario. You give somebody a virtual desktop, they're conducting their work, and from that virtual desktop, they're using a series of cloud-based SaaS applications like a Salesforce or Workday or something like that. There's nothing inherently in virtual desktop and virtual app technologies that will protect or prevent your user from, let's say, downloading all of your Salesforce contacts. And then once they get them downloaded to their virtual desktop, let's say uploading them to their personal Gmail. So that's a really significant gap in traditional app remoting technologies. And in order to solve that in a traditional virtual desktop or virtual app, you end up having to add a bunch of additional technologies. You might add a data loss prevention tool that runs inside the virtual desktop that's looking for confidential data that's being exchanged with the internet or being copied out to a remote drive in some way. You might have to add in like a cloud web security solution or a CASB technology, a cloud access security broker, to try to identify what people are doing with their cloud-based applications. And that's one of the unique things about Sonnet is that all of those capabilities around data protection and upload download controls and content inspection, looking for people copying and pasting personally identifiable information, whether it's a social security number, a driver's license, an email, whatever the case may be, those controls are built into Sonnet. And you can either block those behaviors outright, or you can let them continue, but simply audit them, trigger in an audit log that somebody did an operation relating to that data. And Sonnet also provides built-in session recording, which is of course configurable. But if you do the session recording, you can go right to the recording where the end user triggered the audit violation and review exactly what they were doing to identify if that particular behavior might have a risk to the organization for compliance reasons, and identify exactly what was happening in that session. So the really comprehensive set of security and visibility features right out of the box with the Sonnet solution that with many other technologies, you'd be layering 4, 5, 6 different vendors' technologies to accomplish the same thing.
Tyrone, maybe you could tell us about your security experience with Sonnet IO.
Yeah, it's been pretty straightforward. One of the reasons we wanted to move forward with Sonnet IO is because the security solutions we were looking for were baked in already, and they actually work as intended, which is not as common as you would hope it would be when you're testing out a lot of technologies. So you can do geofencing, which is one of the things we looked at doing, content blocking or stopping people from uploading and downloading files. Um, and the session recording would definitely come in handy, especially if you have something that maybe you have to present or preserve evidence to save for court, which hopefully that never happens. So all those things been in one place and pretty straightforward in how to get those configured, because that's the other half of the battle. Really enjoyed the intuitiveness of just going in, hey, here's the app, here's the control that I want to add. I don't want people getting to this application outside of this IP range, and then bam, you're good to go.
Dharmendra, what can you tell us about security?
Absolutely. I think we right off the bat try to build security into everything that a user does at the application level. We talked about zero trust, so I mean, that's absolutely essential in today's remote work era. But we apply zero trust to individual actions that the user takes in every single application, and we verify to make sure that there are guardrails for any interaction that the user does to these applications. So they do not make mistakes of downloading, let's say, sensitive data into their applications. And so and also, if let's say it's their account is hacked, there is a hacker coming in, and we can sort of observe the entire interaction, and then shut it down if need be, based on what actions they are taking in these applications. And also, I think Tyron talked about simplicity, because we have all those security tooling built in. You do not need endpoint security solutions, you don't need proxy solutions, DLP solutions. That allows us to first of all simplify how IT configures security in general, which is what Tyron was talking about, and also be able to um, because completely integrated solution, we can provide much better security because integrated from the get go. So we can play with a DLP policy, with a potential proxy policy that you would have written and tried to integrate. And so we've been able to sort of improve security significantly while still simplifying it for IT, how they manage security as well at the same time.
Yeah, DM, I
These
just
days,
want to
many
add a comment to that. Sorry, Stan. I wanted to add a comment to that, DM, because when we talked about organizations traditionally having to layer all these different security technologies on top, that's not only a cost related challenge in that you've got to buy 4 or 5 solutions, but as I touched on earlier, the IT admin overhead of having to deploy and manage and operate 5 different security technologies just to enable workers to operate remotely, there's an operational cost associated with that that goes on top of the capital cost that it takes to buy all of these technologies. But someone needs to manage them, and someone needs to secure all of these technologies, and that's a substantial amount of IT overhead.
Absolutely.
Let's turn our attention to a very current topic, generative AI. Now, many users are interested in accessing cloud-based generative AI tools. Can Sonnet.io make this process both seamless and secure?
Yes, absolutely, we can. Many of these organizations, because of the data leakage concerns, are shutting the AI tools within the organization, because once an employee by mistake leaks that information into AI tool, it'll basically learn all that information forever. And so that's very, very risky for these organizations. So how we can help with that and still be able to make the employees of the organization highly productive because of all the learnings they can get from AI tools. So the way we do that is you basically onboard a tool like, let's say, ChatGPT through Sonnet.io, and we can basically monitor what sort of information they are putting into the AI. And let's say if they are putting in sensitive information, your list of customers and things like that, you can block that. You can prevent the users from putting all that information into the ChatGPT. And the other direction as well, we can help with, let's say, they got some data from these AI tools, and many times this data that AI is giving out may not be correct. They refer to it as hallucinations, right? So that data you do not want to put into your enterprise applications. So we can protect there as well. We can actually look at the data being copied from these AI tools, and then protect this data, or like block pasting that data into your enterprise applications. So we can sort of provide security from data leakage perspective to the AI tools, and still be able to make all the employees or remote workers highly productive with the usage of these AI tools.
Tyrone, what's your experience with generative AI?
It's been a back and forth one. In banking, when we first learned about ChatGPT, we actually had kind of a meeting of the minds with some of our other security professionals in banking. They're like, hey, how are you guys handling this? And the data privacy officers were really chiming in on all the discussions that were had, led back to what DM was referring to. Is really the type of data or the data leakage that people are either putting in chat GPT and it's coming out later through a multitude of ways, or what they're taking out of ChatGPT. Who owns it? Is it proprietary? Is it sound? Again, the hallucinations or the model poisoning, if you will. So we've gone back and forth and have really put it in the yellow column, if you will, like use it, but only within these boundaries. Like, hey, you want to create a template, you want to get some understanding about maybe some low level or generic scripting that doesn't involve any proprietary information, go for it. But as far as putting in proprietary information, PII, etc., no.
All right. Well, that gets into observability, and I'd like to dive into observability just a little further. Of course, it's important for administrators to know what's going on, who's accessing what applications and data when, and what kind of performance they're getting. What is needed to achieve better observability, Sean?
Yeah, so observability covers a ton of different things. It's understanding who's using what applications at what time of day, what are they doing inside the applications, how is their user experience and performance. All of those things are great use cases of observability. But I actually want to touch on one that I think is a real shining star in Sonet, and maybe we need to do a better job educating people of how awesome this feature is. A lot of times people will use some form of remote access for doing IT operations support or security operations support. And typically, this is done to enable remote server access for administrative functions. This might be somebody remoting into the firewall configuration console. It may be somebody remoting into a Windows server to troubleshoot something. So lots of orgs have this outsourced, whether it's outsourced IT or even insourced IT, they have this remote administration function they need to do. And in some organizations, the IT support team could be hundreds or thousands of employees. And they're typically using jump boxes, basically a secondary host to hop into a secure part of the network to do this administration work. And that in and of itself is a little bit risky because these jump boxes can be compromised. But outside of it, one of the biggest risks organizations face is if the IT support person logs into that server with an administrative credential, a username and a password that they know, that provides opportunities where that information can be stolen and can be reused by an attacker to launch an attack on the IT systems of that company. So what a lot of organizations recognize is they have to get the passwords out of the hands of the administrators. And one such way of doing that is a secure password vault, where the administrator simply clicks on an icon to get to that remote access administration page, and they're completely unaware what the admin credential is for that resource. All they know is they click a link, and that link takes them to the administration portal. So Sonet has that type of password vaulting built into the solution, where you can serve up either SSH access to Unix systems or remote desktop access to Windows systems, and you simply publish a resource that your administrators hit, and they never have to enter an administrator user ID or password. So you can completely randomize those passwords, make them very, very secure. And as we touched on earlier, the observability and logging features within Sonet IO lets you know who accessed which administrative resource at what time and where they were located. And it also enables you to use advanced flagging to identify when somebody is doing a privileged operation. So let's say they're in an SSH session and they invoke a sudo command to elevate administrative privileges. You can log that right in the system through the observability information to go in and see what that user was doing. And going back to those session recordings, you can actually watch the admin session while they were elevated. What were they trying to do with the data in that server at the time that they elevated admin privileges? So it lets you not only kind of supervise what the administrators are doing, but even identify potential system breaches and what an attacker is trying to do in your system. So really great use case for remote administration, and really tightening down the security and vulnerability of doing remote IT operations.
Tyrone, what can you tell us about your experience with observability?
Yeah, I've worked in certain environments that whenever an administrator remoted into a certain server that would sit at a certain classification or categorization level with high, that those sessions were auto recorded, like literally auto recorded. And then if there was administrative functions taking place, if they were high enough or critical enough or risky enough, then someone would actually go review, hey, there was a change ticket for this administrator to do this on this server. We know someone logged in. We want to actually look at the commands that this person put in to accomplish this change to see if the outcome matched what the change ticket was supposed to be and close it out. So it was a way to dual control in some cases.
Dharmendra, what's your take here on observability?
Yeah. With Sign.io, we provide deep visibility to all the user actions that they are taking, whether they are privileged users or they are, the regular users, the entire interaction. Sean talked about recordings. So these recordings are actually real time. So one of the challenges with visibility with the security tools today, they are based on logs, and you create so much logs. It's very difficult to find out if there's any kind of security threat is occurring, or you're already hacked. Sometimes it takes weeks and months to detect that a hack has occurred, or there is kind of data exfiltration going on, even for big companies. And so it becomes like a needle in a haystack problem. What we are doing is, first of all, we, because of the recordings, you can visually see exactly what's going on, how an attacker attacked a potential application. We also flag within the recordings exactly where a violation occurred. So you don't have to actually watch the entire recording. You can jump to the right location where the violation occurred. So it saves a ton of time. And also, we log all actions as well, but we have real-time alerting. So when we detect any kind of violation, we'll send you a real-time alert. So you don't have to do digging into logs to understand what happened. So you get an alert in real time. You can basically watch the recording of what happened. The recordings are also in real time. You'll get the recording immediately. And so combining the two together, you can basically understand what might be going wrong. And also, maybe have reports. You can download reports to see if somebody is doing a lot of violation, or a group of users. You can see exactly what's going on, what apps they are accessing, what kind of actions they are performing, and so on and so forth. And many times it may not be an attacker. It's just a mistake that they have made. And so it'll help in terms of training as well, because you can see exactly where they are going wrong, and then allows them to train their remote workers, because you can sort of proactively understand, what's going wrong. And also, like, just from a troubleshooting standpoint, we had a contractor who was trying to access Jira, not able to access certain projects. So we could actually see exactly, what he's doing, and, and turns out some configuration that we needed to do. So it saved a whole lot of time in trying to call him, set up a Zoom call, doing screen sharing. None of that was needed. We could proactively solve the problem very, very easily.
How can members of our audience get started with the Sonnet IO solution, Dharmendra?
Yeah, so it's super easy. It's cloud native solution. We can create your instance to do the POC within an hour, and we pre-configure the entire POC. We just refer to it as done for you POC. So essentially, there's nothing for you to configure. We'll give you, test accounts. You can go in, and try out sample apps, look at the user experience, look at the simplicity of IT. And when you purchase the solution, basically that instance, what we give becomes your production instance as well. So you go from essentially a POC or a test setup straight into the production. You just keep adding more users, more applications, and it'll again do elastic scalability. So from test to implementation, essentially it can be done in hours, completely. And yeah, so we've simplified it. And then once you're in production, you're starting with let's say few hundred users. Since it's elastic scalability, you can keep going from few hundred to few thousand. And it's super easy to give it a try and go live.
Well, Tyrone, perhaps you could speak from experience here. How did you get started with Sonnet.io?
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward as DM explained. We definitely took advantage of the done for you POC. Had them set up the environment, and in our case, we were actually mandating a cybersecurity essential certification based in the UK. So Sonnet actually set us up with a point of presence in the UK, which helps the end user experience. It actually, I think, made it a little bit better as far as latency goes from them going natively to those web services that they were going to. And it was literally, hey, we went in, we hooked up the single sign on, which was really straightforward. We added the applications that we wanted to add. We put in the controls we were looking for that we'd also tested with, and did a little end user testing to get some feedback and rolled it out.
Well, it sounds pretty straightforward. Well, we're nearing the end of our time, but before we close, what points should our audience remember, Sean?
Yeah, so I would touch on three things that I think are really key about Sonnet.io. First and foremost is it's one of the fastest ways that you can provide near instant secure remote access to your web apps, your thick client applications, and your remote server administration. So compared to other solutions that might take days, weeks, or months even to deploy, you can be up and running in a matter of hours with the Sonnet solution. So I think speed and time to value is really, really critical. But I think the area that Sonnet really shines is its security and visibility capabilities. We talked a lot about audit logging and data protection and copy paste controls and upload and download controls. All those, and the session recording, I can't forget about that. All of those things are built into this solution. When you look at a lot of other solutions on the market, you either have to pay for the most expensive edition of software by competitors, or you have to layer in 4, 5, 6, 7 different technologies. And as I talked about, it's not only the cost of those technologies, but it's the IT operations overhead of managing 7 different technologies. And all of that's built in to the Sonnet solution. And then I think the last thing I'd touch on is, the cost involved in this solution is a fraction of what competitive offerings in the market are. So when you combine those three things, speed, security, and visibility, and cost, there's really no comparison in the market.
Tyrone, what are your takeaways?
Kind of what we touched on earlier, look for simple solutions that are effective. If they don't work, it doesn't matter that they're simple. Look for things that will minimize the overhead costs or the residual efforts that you have to put in to maintain. Some things need more care and feeding in each other. And then monitor, and make sure you're getting the performance you need and the functionality you need out of anything to look for a consistent end user and administrator experience.
Dharmendra?
Yeah, so I think we sort of designed Sign.io with user experience in mind. So again, they can access all the tools from any device, their favorite browser. So they are using the end user compute that they are comfortable with, the environment that they are comfortable with. And so from an adoption standpoint, it's super easy. They just log in and access all their tools. From IT perspective, we've combined the security tooling and observability tooling within the platform. And so from an IT standpoint, it's super simple. There is no deployment in any device. And so, given the simplicity of the solution, it it applies to anybody. Any enterprise can buy the solution irrespective of the size. Large enterprises, mid-size, small, it's a solution that is available and accessible to everyone. And with remote work, everybody sitting globally, working globally, it's important to see what the users are doing from security perspective, training, troubleshooting perspective. So we have deep observability features like what Sean talked about to be able to help IT train these users, troubleshoot the issues that they are having, and provide security analytics as well. So again, reducing the burden significantly on IT.
Thanks, Dharmendra. That's certainly great information. That is all the time we have in this video webcast. Sincere thanks to our three experts: Dharmendra Mohan, CEO of Sonnet.io; Tyrone Watson Ferguson, Head of Cyber Infrastructure at Burns and McDonnell; and Sean Bass, former CTO of VMware End User Computing and now advisor to Sonnet.io. Thanks to all three for delving into the needs and challenges of today's remote workforce and for explaining how Sonnet.io can help organizations gain higher efficiency and productivity while increasing visibility and keeping networks secure. For more information on this topic, including links and documents of interest, please see the resources area of your webcast player. For Sonnet.io and CIO, I'm Stan Gibson.